Now, nearly half of all the waste produced in UK homes, including increasing amounts of plastic, is now being burned in giant incinerators. It generates electricity, and there are dozens of plants across the country we get more looking for planning permission. But they're often deeply unpopular with locals, none more so than the proposed new incinerator on Portland in Dorset. Emily Hudson has this.
It's definitely been controversial. Plans for a waste burning facility inside the port of Portland have seen widespread opposition. The local council, Olympic sailors based here, and the community have all slammed the idea.
It has been the worst nightmare. We're into our 6th year of campaigning against this.
Laura lives just up the hill from the proposed site.
My neighbours and myself live on the closest street to where the incinerator will be. And for us, that's like, we'd be so directly impacted if this went ahead. Our street is above the top of the chimney, as is most of the population of Portland. And those chimneys are big for a reason, to disperse pollution away from people.
Powerfuel, the company behind the incinerator, says it would burn 200,000 tonnes of waste a year and power about 30,000 homes. It says the proposed brownfield industrial site in a working port is an ideal location, not something the local council agreed with.
Putting an incinerator on a Jurassic coastline opposite a blue flag beach, really? Can't you find anywhere else to put it?
Dorset Council planners rejected the scheme last year and have been overruled by the government. That decision is now the subject of a judicial review.
I think we thought probably was dead and buried, especially with the Labour manifesto and their commitments on carbon and carbon reduction. Probably it's fair to say we were a bit surprised and very disappointed that the first thing pretty much the Labour government did was green light the incinerator on Portland.
But why are we even burning rubbish? 15 years ago, the government was worried about the gases produced from throwing household waste into landfill. So they hiked the taxes councils paid for burying it, which made burning it cheaper and more attractive. But
it makes no sense to build an incinerator that burns dirty materials, that generates vast amounts of greenhouse gas emissions, the same amount as burning coal, when you've banned coal-fired power stations for the same reason. If electricity is dirty from coal, then it must be dirty from burning waste as well.
There are nearly 60 incinerators already operating in the UK, with dozens more going through the planning process. A temporary ban on new incinerators under the last government lapsed last year and wasn't renewed, although new ones are banned in Wales and Scotland.
I think the main problem is England hasn't had a waste strategy for about 15 years, and that the new government hasn't really kicked on in terms of modifying the previous administration strategy. So there is no strategy.
Dorset's recycling rates are actually very good. At almost 60%, the council is the best unitary authority in the country, and they've cut the amount they're sending to landfill by 70%. So do they even need the incinerator?
We're rapidly reducing our refuse that we do burn. I think we're down to about 35,000 tonnes now. It's probably dropping about 5,000 tonnes a year. We're making every effort to reduce that through central government initiatives, and also through our own efforts, to reduce, recycle and reuse. If every resident used the right bin, for example, we would save not only the council a lot of money, but it would also save a lot of the waste we put into incineration.
To say the least, there's a mismatch between the government's green ambitions and its willingness to OK the Portland incinerator, even over local objections.
I've sent letters to Angela Rayner to Emily Band. The one I sent to Emily Band didn't get answered, essentially got pushed back to the Minister who made the decision on the planning application. I didn't ask him about the planning application, I asked him about how it's going with his carbon targets and what is he going to do about it.
Campaigners and the council are now pinning their hopes on next month's judicial review of the government's decision to allow the incinerator to go ahead.
On the one hand, you go through the normal planning process and the local authority makes its perfectly legitimate decision, only for it to be overruled by the government on actually no evidence whatsoever. And the people of Dorset who have done so well with recycling end up being rewarded by having an incinerator they don't want and don't need being put on their doorstep. It's a real slap in the face for local democracy.
Our goal is to see Portland be a zero waste community, to be zero emissions, to be living sustainably. We feel really good. To have an incinerator forced upon us at this point in
How many thoughts? Isn't this just the inevitable consequence of changing the planning system, labelling these people blockers, eco-nuts, NIMBYs? Well, it's a perfectly reasonable case.
I wouldn't label anyone. I believe what's happened here is that there's obviously a legal process which has gone through. There is that judicial review that's coming up, so I don't think it would be appropriate for me to
Judicial reviews
comment on
which
the
you're trying to
legal
limit.
ins and outs. But if I can just finish, actually, it's not completely right to say that the new government isn't trying to get to a better situation when it comes to incineration. In fact, we've introduced now some rules that are going to be some of the toughest that we've seen for a very, very long time, because we've seen a huge amount of drift around this. We haven't seen nationally the kinds of reductions in landfill that we should have been seeing. We haven't seen the increase in recycling we should have been seeing. So new rules,
Dorset's got a wonderful record on
but new rules are coming in. Those new rules are going to make sure that local and environmental factors have to be at the forefront, that it won't be possible to have new incinerators unless they're replacing old polluting ones or they're reducing landfill, that it won't be possible to have new incinerators if they're not ready for carbon capture, and it won't be possible to have new incinerators if they don't have a clear plan for actually delivering that energy and that heat to local
So you
people.
say there's hope for people there on Portland?
Well, that, I believe, is a process that was already started some time ago. I don't want to go into all the legalities of this, Peter, because I don't want to be getting into legal niceties that, wouldn't be appropriate. But certainly, we've been really clear, as a new government, we need to have a regime that works for local people, the environment, and for our economy as well. That's why we set out that new approach.
What do you think?
And there are two sort of big issues behind this, aren't there? There's how clean or dirty is incinerating waste, and I think, clearly quite a dirty way of producing energy. The second is local democracy. Here is a council who've done really, really well on recycling, and they're now being forced to host this incinerator to burn other people's rubbish from other local authorities.
It does generate electricity, and your government was in favour of keeping going with some of the coal burning and the gas-fired power stations to keep the lights on.
Yeah, but these incinerators are seen as something that's sort of, green. It's getting rid of waste and you're getting energy at the same time. Well, actually, it's producing greenhouse gases in, broadly the same terms as coal-fired power stations. So I think we need to have a proper conversation about whether we should be building any more of these. There was a temporary hold on them. That has lapsed. It's now up to this government to decide whether it's going to stop building incinerators or whether it's going to continue.
And
it needs to make the decision quickly.
But
Well, we
if you
set
think
out
that,
that new,
sorry,
we have set out that new
Yeah.
regime exactly so that we have a proper framework around this, so we don't have the kind of confusion, if I'm honest, that we had previously.
what about the local democracy plan? Do you think that's also pretty important?
I think it's pretty important, as you just heard from a councillor there on screen, that you've got the Jurassic coastline, beautiful park, and a council that has done really, really well on reducing landfill is now hosting or being asked to host an incinerator for everyone else's rubbish from elsewhere in the UK, and they're being forced to do that centrally.
Yeah, I mean, there might have been a case where the community can benefit from something which is in the national interest, mightn't there?
Well, that's why we need to ensure that actually there's a proper energy plan, and I just set out a few moments ago that other tough conditions that are going to be applied, but there needs to be a proper energy plan so that people will be benefiting from the heat that is generated directly. So, these stipulations that have been set out, as I say, by the new government, I think are going to make a big difference, not just for the environment, but potentially for people's bills as well.
Okay. Now let's take a look at some of the other political stories here in the South this week.